I don't even know why I put this slide in, but I think it's something like that, because there's a sort of whole other tradition of architecture which is about sort of rational, but even in the rational, there's always the problem that the mathematical model doesn't actually match the architectural model, so you get things like Mies having to try and deal with the corner element. I mean, the corner is always a problem because you have the inside and you have the outside, so you can't actually have the two systems working together. So we just thought that was interesting, because when we took this mathematical model, we had to devise our own tricks to make it occupiable. You can't actually occupy a surface like a Klein bottle very easily. When we actually drew the building in orthogonal form, it actually makes no sense at all, which is what we hoped when we submitted this to the planning department. We'd hoped they'd just go, well, you don't understand it, we'll just give it a permit. But they didn't. Eventually they did. And so when you deal with something like this field, the rules become essentially different to the normal rules, where I think a lot of other buildings that we do, we find ourselves cutting the building or joining things together, which is sort of the traditional way that architects work. But when you work in this field, if you want to stay true to the model, it's all about distortion and twisting and changing, but it always remains essentially the same thing, which poses some problems in thinking about how you might occupy it. And what occurred to us was a way that you could occupy it is like a sort of ship in a bottle. You put something actually inside the bottle without destroying it. It's a model we made which shows this thing where you cut the Klein surface and you get two Möbius strips. So we made this sort of giant model which is like a clam. And that shows you where we've tried to occupy the space inside with this other platform space. And also when you look at this section taking through the most complex bit, which is the bit where it actually intersects itself, you can see that really a lot of the Klein bottle is actually buried underground. So that becomes a kind of another device for being able to use this surface or appear to use this surface. And to us, it's no different than Mies having to deal with his kind of rational grid and find a way to turn the corner. The plan itself is pretty simple. You can see basically similar to the spiral, so that you actually a staircase that runs up, and that's part of the sort of end of the journey down to the peninsula, ends in this sort of great grand room at the top, and it picks up the bedrooms on the way through. It's not actually a very complicated plan, and that is acknowledged by this red surface, which the red surface is essentially kind of acknowledging that platform, that insertion within the Klein bottle. The building itself has lots of benefits to do with kind of ventilation and light and those sort of things and journey, but it also has this sort of strange sense of proximity where at a beach house you can have kind of parties occupying different parts of the house, but then even though they're separate, they feel like they're kind of together. So as a type, it actually seemed to sort of work very well for a beach home. The building doesn't have any kind of rational structural basis, so the structure was quite complicated, and we had to sort of work these drawings through. Most of it pivots on that one central piece. You can see the structural drawing, the construction shots. So top right corner, that sort of main column where everything kind of runs around. But basically using the sort of techniques that they're good at down the peninsula. They're good at steel, they're good at just timber, lightweight construction. So there's nothing really profound about the structure.
If they didn't get it quite right, they could fudge it.
They fudged it, and it was basically using the skills that they had, which was, as I described those, but also the skill of the carpenters, which is really a visual skill. So instead of trying to communicate a lot of this with dimensions, which we could because it was built in 3D, we actually communicated a lot of it visually because that was the sort of thing that they understood. They knew how to kind of build to look, which is complete opposite direction to what we work these days, with computer models. There's always a sort of tendency to try and get the model to allow prefabrication, all that sort of stuff. Well, this was actually building by render, really. The building itself has this kind of lovely relationship with the tea tree, the sort of tortured nature of the tea tree. And also harks back with something that we wanted to hark back to the fibro shack. It's almost like the fibro shack has grown up. And these are some of the rooms that run around. So you've got the sort of great room that everyone can sort of hang around together, or you can kind of retreat into these other spaces which just have these little dioramas back into the landscape.